Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of HeadCoachU. I am Bryan Fischer, joined, as always, by former BYU and Virginia head coach Bronco Mendenhall, and we're doubling up on the Who's today. We have Tony Bennett, the basketball coach there at Virginia, and our first non-football head coach. Tony, thank you so much for jumping on with us.
I feel great pressure knowing I'm the first non-football coach, but honored and to be with my friend, and told Bronco how much I miss him and we miss him, but I'm happy to be here and just talk whatever we end up talking about.
Well, how was Bronco just knowing?
Oh no, you're going to go right there.
Yeah, how was Bronco as an fellow employee? Was he good around the water cooler? Like what was the mood there?
Well, unfortunately, I wish where our basketball facility is in football, we don't interact that much. But I don't know. There was just I sensed it right away. There was just an unsaid respect, and then observing him. I wouldn't say from afar, but enough. I just loved what he stood for and how he went about rebuilding the Virginia football program. And being a coach's son, watching my father go through many major rebuilds and understanding that, just the respect. And one of my son's best friends ended up playing at the end for Bronco. And he just said how much he loved just the respect he had and how much he loved playing for Coach. And so just those things, when people talk about that on the inside, and obviously seeing the results of them winning and all that stuff was great. But beyond that, it was good. And then whenever we got to be together and talk, it just was a kindred spirit. I'm sure we do things differently in some ways, but there was a connection that was good.
One of the things that I think it would be fascinating for me to hear more of. So I love your dad, and I had a few interactions. And for our listeners, Tony's dad is just amazing. And when he would come into town, sometimes he would find his way over to the football building, which was just so cool. But it meant a lot to me, right? That Tony's dad and an amazing coach in person would then just wander across and visit another head coach. And there was, I think, and he never told me the motive, but there's a reassurance that comes from just talking to someone who knows. Mm-hmm. And he knew. And head coaches a lot of times are lonely and isolated, and it gave me a window to not only learn, but to have someone listen, but just to talk. And it was just so great. So I'm wondering what else, Tony, besides like the schematics, and what other maybe life lessons or lessons that your dad taught you through coaching, right, that you apply or that maybe you hold most dear?
Yeah, I think, the most important thing he taught me, because I played for him, and he was a fiery Italian guy that was the kindest, grandfatherly guy, but he was so fiercely competitive that he sometimes let his emotions get the best of him, and he always battled his emotions in coaching. But I think one of the most valuable things that I learned from him as a player and even as a coach is when he would either step across that line and maybe – challenge you. And I gave him a green light because I said, I want to be an NBA player playing for him. I said, so you can do whatever you want. What I sometimes regret it, but I said, push me. And whenever I thought he would cross the line, or he thought he did to the players, the team, he would stand before us, whether it was the next day at practice or even in the moment, and say, son or fellas, forgive me. He said, I this is a battle I have. I sometimes lose my emotions, and we need you, and I'm sorry, I apologize, forgive me. And when you see a leader that you respect and knows that, like, he had a way of challenging you, and then when you sensed he was sincere with his apology or his asking for forgiveness, boy, that would really rally you. And then you feel like, man, I'll run through a brick wall. Because sometimes we as leaders, we want to, especially when you're a younger head coach, you want everyone to think, I know everything and I'm right. And the bottom line is, at least me, I don't. I make mistakes and I'm going to fail. And when you can see the vulnerability of a leader saying, I screwed up, will you forgive me? I think that's a powerful lesson, Bronco, that I learned from him. And I think the other thing is, as we talked before we went on the air, and you've had to do this at Virginia and probably, we've seen it, he always took the have-nots. Whenever he took a job, whether it was high school, small college, and he worked his way up to even where I played for him at Green Bay, it was a Division II. Then he took the Wisconsin job. I think they had been to one NCAA tournament win in like 50 years. Then he went to Washington State and Pullman, and they were major rebuilds. And I watched his, I guess I'll call it good stubbornness. I know my plan. I'll make adjustments, but I'm going to stick to the way I'm going to do it. And he said, son, when you take a new job, make sure you recruit players and hire a staff that you can lose with first before you win. Get those guys that'll stay true to what you believe. But he knew it. And I think when the waves started slapping against the boat and things got rocky, as a younger head coach, I think a lot of people, well, I need to do it a different way. This isn't working. Man, he dug in, stayed true, took a ton of criticism, but he wouldn't waver and made little adjustments. And he outlasted, his own doubts. The criticism does it, but he outlasted his own doubts. And that's remarkable. And had I not seen that, I don't think I would have had the confidence or trust to do it. But I saw him take poor programs, build them where they became competitive first, then successful. And that's real stuff. Like, that's the truth. Yeah. When that stuff happens, you find out the true serum of what you got in your team, your staff, individual players when it goes bad or something happens or you got to go through the losses and adversity.
Yeah. So I love the word vulnerability. And I think the most powerful leaders and the dichotomy you just expressed of someone that is demanding and will push and ask so much of his team, but also has the internal moral compass to know and sense, right, when he stepped over. And sometimes in the moment, but sometimes after practice, and when you're contemplating, and I love the idea of swift and certain in terms of handling those things rather than stewing. And the coaches that then, as you said, the next morning or that night at a meeting, then stand in front of the team and address that, the credibility they generate and the love that's exchanged between leader and team, that bond, because we're all fallible. And when the players see that recognition and the determination to work on it, knowing it's going to be ongoing, right? It's not going to be fixed overnight. But as you mentioned, that same challenge of battling emotions or maybe battling the competitive spirit is also the stubbornness that allows you to do remarkable things at places that sometimes haven't been so remarkable.
Yeah, no, it's like a battle or a war being waged in the inside of your heart, your mind, and you got to try to find that sweet spot. But you can't ever compromise the stuff that really matters. And that's why if you don't have that, I think you can get chewed up and spit out in this profession. And it's hard. It's getting more challenging in ways, but those things, you have to have things that are your core values and things that matter.
I also love the thought of surrounding yourself with people you can lose first with, because it really speaks to identifying the brutal facts and acknowledging that this program is struggling. We are at a deficit. It's going to take time. And I think that actually builds confidence in staff and players that you see it, right? Even though your expectations and standards are very high, you're framing in a context that's real. Yeah. And I think when those around you see that, there's more confidence generated in the leader. So I'm wondering why, what within your dad, maybe did you see that he wanted to take on those have-nots? Or was it just part of, like, I don't know, what do you see there?
Well, interesting. He's told me at times, he said, I think sometimes I did it because it's all I knew. I was an underdog and I came from a small town. It's his parents came over from Italy and didn't really have much, but he said sometimes, I was afraid to fail. So I took something maybe that he's real honest about that. Yeah. He said, I took something where I could just build. And I think that's real too. I mean, that's hard. You say, hey, I want to, whatever the Cadillac program is in basketball, it takes a lot also to take over whether it's a Duke or a Carolina or Kentucky that's had success in basketball, or, who's going to follow Coach Saban at Alabama, or, those are real things too. So there's part of that. Like, I think I can make a difference because this is how I know how to do it. But it's just also the way he was raised, that blue collar kind of mentality. So, and I don't know how he did it because he lasted 40 years. I don't know, but he was stubborn in a good way. And he also has a man of faith that I think he was compelled to try to have that guide him in his coaching. And then sure, the competitive side of wanting to touch something. Because when you turn a program around, there's a sweetness in that. Like when it's been struggling and all of a sudden you turn it, that's your, or the team, the staff, that's your doing. That's that legacy that, boy, when you taste it, it's big time. And it's so hard to do. And then it's hard to keep up. So there's different values, but I think that's what drove him.
Yeah. So when I see the journey that you've taken at Virginia, and a lot of that work was done before I arrived. And so do you remember a moment of where you feel like, man, the flywheel is actually turning and there's traction and this is going to work? And if you remember it, how many years in, or what moment, and what do you remember about that, if you do remember?
Yeah, I think the first year was all like, I remember we got up to a 3-0 start in ACC play. And I remember, thinking, wow, maybe this isn't as hard as I thought. Was that a mistake? It didn't. But we improved it a little bit. But in year 4, remember I went and played my alma mater at Green Bay, where my dad coached, where I played, and we got beat there, and we shouldn't have. Then we went to Tennessee and got beat by 30 plus in a game. And, and like any place, I'm sure the fan base, and I don't have social media. I don't even try to listen to that stuff, but I just sense, boy, people are starting to wonder, can this guy do it? Is his way going to work? It's, I don't know. I could feel that, but that's where my experiences of like, stay true to what's going on. We just kind of got it going. That year we won the ACC regular season and the conference tournament. And I just, you could feel it. We went to a Sweet 16, and we had a little bit of continuity. It was just a breakthrough moment, and then you felt it. And that was, and again, you have to have success to validate it. But that was, I thought, where we turned the corner and went on a pretty special run that way. But you needed to get over some of those hurdles.
I love the idea of success to validate, and it's a slippery slope, especially when you're taking over a new program, because the world jumps right to outcome and to validate if your methods are working or not. And I know your approach and the design of your program is so focused on the development of people and the amazing principles that come with that. And we both know you have to have, I think to be completely fulfilled, you have to have both. The results have to happen.
Sure.
So you can keep doing the real important work of building young people. I'm wondering, how much do you see your players looking outside for validation versus what they're just hearing from you and your staff, and that wrestle with social media, as you kind of alluded to, and the landscape changing, and what do you see with your players and how they're navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, that you're talking, qualitative versus quantitative.
Yes.
That's such a hard battle. I see it in our children, my kids that we've raised. The voices, we talk a lot about guard your heart, guard your mind, because the voices of the outside are so strong. And whether it's social media or your inside voices, I'll tell you, if we can just talk freely, I'll tell you, I was reading this book, and it was like a thing I did that gets to this with our team. And it was really powerful. I can't remember the name of the book, but the book had you do an exercise where you take a piece of paper, and I did this with my team, and you write down on this piece of paper anything that someone has said to you that you had come into agreement with that was a lie. They said, like, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're a choker, you're not good enough, you're lazy, just the list. Things either you've said to yourself or other people, could be your parents, all this stuff, and you write them down. And it's amazing when you do this, the list, you're like, all the stuff. So I did this with my team. I'll kind of take you through it. So we sat in the film room, and I said, I want you to, in your own time, you're spaced out, anything that someone has said or you've come into agreement with, I want you to write them down. And we took about 10 or 15 minutes. I walked out of the room, and I said, take this seriously. And I said, all right, there's the list. I said, now I want you, you all have gifts. I said, God-given gifts that are innate in you. I said, now I want you, and I looked at each guy, and I said, these aren't the ones you have to write down, but I look at you, Kihei Clark, and I see warrior. I said, you are a competitive warrior. I said, I went through most of the guys, these are things I see, but what are the things that you feel are gifts that you have are innate? And I said, I want you to write those down, and you think about them. I said, they're special gifts that are innate. So they wrote them down, and we gave them time. Then I walked into the room, and there was a paper shredder. We gave them 2 pieces of paper. And I said, listen, this is the battle. I said, you're going to be tempted to go back to these things. And I said, it made me want to go and apologize to my own children for things I've said to them. And we talked about vulnerability and asking for forgiveness. I said, I've wronged you guys. I've at times called you lazy, soft, and there's a motivational side, you we talked about that. But I said, when the time's right, you get up individually at your own time. We'll walk out of the room. This is how we're going to end it. I said, you put that sheet with all those things you've come into agreement with that are false truths, that whether your own mind, the enemy, whatever has tried to put in your mind. And I said, you shred them. I said, they're gone. Doesn't mean you won't battle and they won't come up. So it's just it was a cool exercise. So the point of, sorry for the long story, but it's powerful is, they shred those, and there's something symbolic about shredding those things. And so again, that message of guard your heart, guard your mind, power of in the tongue is life and death. So what you speak, what you come into agreement with is huge. So we try to talk about that to those guys. And, my dad always told me praise and blame are the same coin, just opposite sides. Man, the world will praise you when you have success. Oh, the greatest thing in the world. And boy, a few days later, you screw up on the other side, they'll shame you. You're a bum. You're no good. And again, I told you my dad's faith was strong, but he shared with me the story in scripture. And I always were very like, whether you have a faith or not, there's great truths, biblical truths. But like Palm Sunday is when, if you believe, when Christ came in and all the people were putting the palms down saying, Hosanna, Jesus is coming. He's going to do all this stuff. And like 5 days later, the same people who were praising he's coming in were saying, crucify him, crucify him, the bum, and it's just and that was powerful. But that's the society we live in. We do it to ourselves. We do it to others. And when you can come to grips with that, when you can say, you know what, I've done that, but this is true. Maybe you can help these young people, because that's a battle that's real, and mental health comes into play. So that's real stuff.
Well, I love and thanks for sharing that. And man, just to piggyback off of that, a similar exercise when I inherited Brigham Young University's program. One of the first team meetings, I had buses show up to the building, and I might have told the story online or on our show already, Brian. So I'm going to tell it anyway, just if I have. But anyway, we had buses take us up Provo Canyon, which is a canyon close to where BYU is in the mountains, and we had bonfires raging. And I divided the team into groups of about 10 and gave them large sheets of paper. And I just asked them to go off and document what things weren't working in the program, what things had to be changed. And that exercise took about an hour and a half for them to write all those things down. But when they came back, I asked that each of those, and I invited them to groups of 10, each basically squad would read those things. But once they read it, then they were to put it on the fire and watch it burn. So much like the shredder, right? The power of symbolism. And when there's a symbolism, the long-term retention is so much deeper. And there's some emotion that comes with watching it go in the shredder, right? Or go in the fire. And then I followed up with the idea of go back now and just write what you're willing to do about it. And they were back in about 10 minutes, so there's all this long list, but really those became the covenants basically of the first year there of things they were willing to do that I could help them do. And so just in listening to your story individually, it made me reflect on that. And the two-sided coin and the power of the tongue is, and so the world, the outside world is so pervasive now in the conditional nature of support. And so going back to your Palm Sunday example, I love the idea. Sometimes people, they have their idea of how they want it done. And so their belief changes through methodology. Well, I would have done it this way, or I would have done it that way, or this isn't the kind of leader I thought he was going to be. I expected like a warlike leader, and I've got a cerebral leader. And so I'm wondering through your career, how you've remained authentic to you, right? So not looking to be someone for someone else, and not maybe, I don't know, the praise of the world. How has it not gotten to you, or has it at times?
Well, I'll quote a proverb that my father would always share to me when he was about ready to let me know. He'd say, wounds from a friend are better than kisses from an enemy. So when I knew he was either something of our team or something with me or that. So, I really think having people in your life, for me, obviously, my father was obviously in love with my mom and dad, but my father, basketball was the biggest influence. my wife, who will look in, George Morris, who we know and share well, our team chaplain, will speak the truth in love, but they'll say, hey, look, my wife's awesome that way. She keeps me on track, because it is, your eyes can start drifting away. And, I use so many stories in scripture, about with our players, just truths that I think share that. But I think people in your life, and when you're a coach or a player, man, you get humbled so often. You get embarrassed, you get beat, you don't have the answers. And there's something that what true humility does, or when you face that kind of adversity, and it does keep you humble, and it does keep you reliant, hopefully, on the right stuff. And, I was the first coach in the history of college basketball to lose as a 1 seed to a 16 seed. Never happened before until this year. And unfortunately, or fortunately, happened to Purdue. And I remember my staff called me, hey, tune in. We're going to have a team join us. Purdue might get beat by whatever. And I remember it was weird, because I know that coach. I flipped the game on and I started watching. All of a sudden, all those emotions came back. And I was like, I started pulling for Purdue. I was like, I don't want to have to go through that. But that experience, you talk about humbling you, but it did something more than that. It was, it made me realize, I did some soul searching in that, and it made me realize, if I never coach a team to a Final Four, or don't have any more success, or perhaps I get fired, I'll still be okay. I still love the game. I still have my wife and kids. I still ultimately have my faith, which gives me my peace and perspective beyond what the world says. I'll be okay. And when a person knows they can handle some of the worst stuff, professionally speaking, vocationally, we're not talking about losing a loved one or battling a life-threatening disease or things like that. But if you can kind of handle that and be okay, that gives you a freedom to really go after and be true to yourself, and not be too much, but enjoy the moment, but not be such a captive or victim of what is the world saying? What if I screw this up? What if I can't do it? You'll still have those emotions and battle them, but that's that I think going through that was one of those moments, and we called it the painful gift. Experience. And I tell our team this, and I told our young men that. So we lost that team I had the next year. It's a great story, right? We won the national championship, but we played the next year as the 1 seed. We had a great year, and we're playing Gardner-Webb. We're down 6 at the half. And I the whole halftime was way different than the year before. And I said, fellas, it's okay. I said, we're going to go out there, we're going to play. I said, but you're going to be okay no matter what happens. And I don't even think they believe me. I don't know. But I said, it's okay. But the question I always ask myself and those guys, I don't know if we would have won a national championship that next year had we not gone through that so-called humiliating or painful gift, however you want to look at it, that loss. And so, it's always interesting that going through those things, being humbled, but realizing you're going to be okay, even if it doesn't go the way you want. Had we not won the championship, had, something would have gone, it'd still be okay. And that is freeing, I think. And so that helps you stay authentic and true to something, because this is all a gift. It is. And anyways.
So I love the idea that feedback is a gift, and even painful feedback is a gift, right? If then you've reached the maturity over time to know that it all works out. And that's where I think your team is so lucky to have a leader that knows it will be okay. And eventually they might ask you, how do you know it's okay? And and now that's a great opportunity. And in listening to you, you talked about your family and your kids, right? And that's an anchor point. And you talked about your faith, and that's an anchor point. And those two things are how you already know it's going to be okay. And I think it's refreshing for players that are in the arena and so visible to know it's going to be okay. But sometimes they'll come to you in private or just in an unexpected moment and just say, Coach, how do you know? And those moments to me are the ones that are really the essence of coaching, or why we even coach. And I've seen just that influence that you've had, not only on your team, but I would say a community in the athletic department. And I think a lot of people wanted to know how you knew, And I think that influence in and of itself carried so much weight. And I'm wondering, in today's world of college athletics, in my opinion, it seems to be moving farther from that. But I'm wondering what you see, at least in the world of college basketball, or maybe holistically, what influences or what it's looking like.
Yeah, I mean, football's the driver of so many things, but I think men's college basketball, they're with the new landscape of NIL and transfer portal, they're the ones that are affected, and I think everyone's in kind of an experimental mode right now. They can say, "Oh, I got it figured out." You don't, and so what I choose in our staff, because it makes you question: what is this about? I've been asked, and I think you might be maybe the smartest of all of us Broncos today, but I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't interrupt you.
No, I'm trying to still figure out what it's about. That was one of the reasons of the pause. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah, no, and just, it does make you think about it. And again, talked with my father, my wife, people in this program, my staff. We decided we get to choose how we run our program. It might be harder in some ways to be successful. Virginia has its challenges, as you as a football coach here had it hard, and we had them as a basketball program. And I think, it's probably in some ways it's easier to turn a basketball program than a football program, and even where the program was. But you get to choose how you want to do it. And we said, let's double down on what we believe is important. Now, you can't stick your head in the sand. You still have to be in the world, maybe not necessarily of it, but you have to. All right, NIL is a part of it. So how are you going to do things the right way? I think you adjust, but you stay true to what matters. And we said, we're going to double down on what matters. And you can see one of our pillars behind me is thankfulness. It's humility. We have 5, we call them our pillars, maybe because we're at Virginia, or our rocks or cornerstones, but humility, passion, unity, servanthood, and thankfulness. There are 5 pillars. We're going to recruit guys to those pillars. We're going to run our program in the same way. And if it's enough, it's enough. And if it's not, all right, then at that time we'll address it and adjust. But I don't know many other ways to do it where I can be successful, or be successful in the right way. So that's what we're going to try to do. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it's the way I know how. And I still think the pendulum will swing back, I think. And those programs might come out ahead if you can hang in there. And if it doesn't, all right, then we'll address it at that time. So, but I don't know for sure, because everyone's in an experiment, but that's what we're choosing to do. And again, it starts with recruiting and hiring the right people to go on that journey. That's where you start. If you don't start there, then it's going to be tough.
I love the idea of what you just said, of adjusting but stay true. And Jim Collins wrote, and I believe it was in Good to Great, it might have been Built to Last. He said, preserve the core but stimulate progress. And so the core, and I think that's one of the coolest things about your program and your leadership, is there's a consistency of principle that is unyielding and unwavering. And there might be some methodologies around that maybe adjust to whatever is needed to some extent. And I think that ties, in your words, to success in the right way. And because success can happen differently based on definition of success. And I think your definition has more than outcome, even though it absolutely includes outcome.
Sure.
And that to me is part of this experimental component of how many will keep going down that path, which I hope a lot.
One of the things that motivates me, and again, it always has, is like, I don't know if this is a right motivation or wrong motivation, but like, I wanted to show the college basketball world, you can do it differently, and you don't have to take a back seat, and you can be successful, and perhaps you can win championships or be really good. And maybe that means a national championship, but like, that drove me. And it's from I've listened to a lot of your post-game conferences, like after a big win or a hard loss. And I loved your insight, Bronco, was remarkable. Like, you're so well read, you're so astute, you're so humble. Like, you represent the things. And when you're around that, whether you were the squash coach or anything, like, no, you can learn from that. But you were in such a public eye, and I'd listen to a lot of the things, and they so aligned and resonated with what I believe. But my wife maybe 10, 12 years ago, she sent me this TED Talk, and it was Simon Sinek, this little 5-minute podcast called The Golden Circle. And it was kind of like, okay, what you do is important, how you do it's important, but you know, it's the why question that everybody's talking about. And that just, I don't know why that resonated with me. Why am I doing it? I want to show you can be counterculture. You can do it differently. And so that really is kind of what motivated me. And it's almost like a little bit of a reset. Okay, now you're in another change. Can you still double down and do it differently than the way everyone says you have to do it? So that's kind of been a motivating for me.
I love that. And then just, and maybe we can kind of close with this train of thought, as you were talking about who you surround yourself with, and basically drawing staff members and players. And you didn't say this, but maybe it's in relation to your pillars, which do they align with that, or could they, or are they willing to, you know, so maybe they're not yet, but wow, I think they would want to if they knew what they were. Yeah. So when you're selecting and assessing staff and players, which you've done so well, maybe how much do your pillars play into that, or other?
Huge. And none of us, these pillars, I'll give you the short background because it's worth noting. So those 5 pillars I mentioned, about 40 some years ago, my father, who was a man of faith, he was challenged. He said, somehow I want my faith to play out in my vocation as a basketball coach. He said, so I don't want it to be separate. So what did he do? He literally opened up scripture and said, what would make for a great basketball team or a great player? He said, a player or a team that's humble. They don't think too highly of themselves. They don't think too lowly of themselves. They have an identity. They know who they are. They have sober judgment. Those who humble themselves will be exalted. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled. There's so many different scripture verses, but you talk about a position of strength, true humility. So he said humility. Then he said passion. Well, a team that is passionate. They love what they do, but they're passionate. They're wholehearted. Love the Lord with all your heart. You know, like you can go through, there's so many scriptures about passion. A team that is unified. The house is not divided. And hence that's where that, you know, a team that you can lose with first before you win. And there's tons of scripture. A team that is unified, a player that plays, a team, and then servanthood. That was, he looked in there and said, a great team. The way to greatness is through serving. We call it that story in scripture of when Christ washed the disciples' feet. Yes. If you call me your teacher and mentor, then you need to go and do likewise. Like, what does that mean to be a foot washer? What does that mean to be a great teammate and serve? That might be your best player has to be the guy that's aggressive and takes more shots. And the other guy's got a screen, you know, like, so true servants, man, that's the way to greatness. And then thankful in success for all the blessings. And then what we just talked about, thankful in adversity, when those painful gifts come, because that's where true wisdom is. So like he said, that could make a great basketball team. So like literally, I could just picture him 40 years ago, and that's really been his legacy. And man, I tell you, corporations, whether you have a faith, you don't, pro teams, they've taken those, and everyone has their own. You have so many yourself, but those became the pillars. And so no one has those down. Those are the teachings of Christ. That's the life he lived, again, regardless of what you believe. And they've stood the test of time. They're not words on a wall. They have stood the test. And man, what a great way to impart that to your young men. But when you're recruiting, do we recruit to the pillars? We try our best. And again, know that people will evolve. So that's everything. And you can always point to those. Man, we broke down. We lost our humility. We lost our passion in this game. And it gets into those things. So I think it's great for me. It gives you something to lock into. And boy, that's guided my life and guided so many things. And talk to our young men when they come back. As a husband coach, and now I understand what it means to serve. Now I understand what it means to be humble when I have to do certain things.
I love the framework that it provides to not only take on challenges, but to assess setbacks. It's so great to have a structure to do that. But I think maybe even more compelling, or every bit of not more powerful, is the idea of your faith to play out in your vocation, because I think it speaks to authenticity, and you're not wearing a mask at one place that's not you, and you put on a different mask someplace else. And if the things that are most important to us, which I know for you, as you've mentioned, are your family and your faith and building these amazing young people, those aren't just words on the wall. I've seen it play out. And so that to me is where a a program's culture is most vibrant, where whatever you see posted, you see manifest.
Yeah.
And that's more uncommon than common. So many times you see things on the wall of a building or professional visit, and then you just simply watch, and there's not an alignment there. But the programs that are led the most, I think they have the fewest things on the wall, but those things are being manifest all around you when you visit, and you can feel it. And that was so much fun to me, just to be across the street in Charlottesville and to see that influence. And it was really helpful. So I appreciated your example, not only the results, which is fun. That wasn't really why I was interested. I liked the substantive part of, faith playing out in vocation. An authentic leader that was also having success is, I think, pretty rare. And that's why I'm so thankful you chose to come on and just share. So I really appreciate it, Tony. Thank you.
No, thanks for having me, Bronco. And like I said, we miss you here for sure, but you're making an impact. And, again, our steps are ordered. We know that, and means a lot. And Brian, I'm sorry, two coaches just started talking and you got sort of left out. But
we love this kind of conversation, because it is all really a podcast about kind of sharing knowledge between head coaches. And I just kind of want to follow up on that just a little bit. You go into those ACC meetings right when you arrived there at Virginia. You have Coach K, you have some of the legends of the sports there. What'd you pick up in those meetings with your fellow ACC coaches? And now that they're kind of being replaced by some youngers, you're kind of the elder statesman now. What are you passing along to that next generation?
Basically just shut up and listen. Be seen and not heard. But I have above me is a poster of Rocky on the steps at when he did that. And that's what drove me to try. I didn't know if I could do it, but I was like, I want a chance to go toe-to-toe against the best and just maybe get a title fight, a la Rocky. And that's what I wanted to see. Can we build a program here and test ourselves at a place? Because I marveled at Stanford when I was at Washington State. I'm like, if I had a son, man, that's the best of both worlds. You have the academic piece. You have, you're in the Pac-10 at the time, Pac-12 now. But I'm like, can I go against the Blue Bloods, the Coach K's, coach with all those programs, coach between? We had Boeheim, 4 Hall of Famers, but just their, they competitive, tough-minded, not afraid to speak their mind. They cared, those guys, they cared about the state of the game. That's why they're missed. So they were really, great for the game and did it. Good thing about college basketball and college football is, and that's why I think the NFL more mirrors college football. The NBA is different because I said, the NBA has the players, college has the game, but there's so many different ways you can do it. So many different systems of play, styles of play, philosophies. And so that's what I love. So I know I'm going round about your answer. I learned a lot from them. I learned, again, the way they had done it, they lasted. Again, a lot of different opinions on them. They faced criticism. They handled success, but they lasted. And you got to take your hat off to that. But I still knew I had to do it my way. And I didn't, not even my father's way. It influenced me, but true to what I believed. And if I tried to be a mini my father or mini Jim Boeheim or Coach K, that wouldn't work for me or work at Virginia. But great respect, but wanted to cut their heart out when we competed. But great and and certainly was humbled many times by those guys in competition and got a few swipes in, so that was good too.
Well, I think that's something that I think every head coach out there can probably relate to a little bit, especially on and off the field. But Tony, we had a high bar set in terms of our first non-football head coach. You cleared it. We'll have to have you back again.
It's a world record. I'm announcing it as an official world record by a non-football coach on the podcast. I don't think this one will ever be broke.
That's my guy there. Bronco's my guy. He's talking good to me.
The check will be in the mail, I'm sure. And,
exactly.
What you promised was amazing, Bronco. So for your next coaches, I hope they get at least half as what I got.
We do really appreciate it, Tony, and best of luck this season. I know you guys are really kind of starting that journey again as you embark on the 23 season. So for Bronco Mendenhall and Tony Bennett, I'm Bryan Fischer. We'll catch you again next week here on Head Coach U.